there. I'm Jessica, and this is the God Loves Justice podcast, where we take the big and sometimes intimidating topic of biblical justice and righteousness and break it down into smaller, more digestible parts. We look at justice in pieces, so no one episode is the full picture, but in each episode, we get to see part of it. I'm the author of the book, God Loves Justice, a user-friendly guide to biblical justice and righteousness. So in the last episode, we looked at this Hebrew word mishpat and what it means. Today, we're going to go one step further. We're going to look at what does mishpat look like when it's put into action. And to do that, we're going to look at a story of a king in Israel who did mishpat. I have a hard time seeing things in theory. I don't want to just know like the dictionary definition for something. I want a model or an example of how to do that thing. How do I take it and put it into action and make it something that's visible in the real world? So today, let's look at God says he loves mishpat. What does this mishpat look like when it's put into action? What I love about the example that we're going to go through today is that the model, the example that we see of doing justice, it creates a beautiful picture of how awesome God's justice is. So let's get started. In the Old Testament, the verbs that were paired with mishpat, they were action-oriented. So it was to do, to execute, to keep mishpat. Mishpat was meant to be put into action in Israel. Mishpat was dynamic. It caused change. It made wrongs right again. So let's get started reading in 1 Kings. I'm going to read out of the New Living Translation. The story starts soon after Solomon became king. There's kind of a famous story where God appeared to Solomon in a dream and said he would give Solomon anything that he requested. And Solomon, he asked for wisdom to rule his people well. And according to God, that was a great request. I'm going to read 1 Kings 3, 10 through 12. The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for wisdom. So God replied, "Because you have asked for wisdom in governing my people with justice, mishpat, and have not asked for long life or wealth or the death of your enemies, I will give you what you have asked for. I will give you a wise and understanding heart, such as no one else has had or ever will have." So in this, we know God is really happy that Solomon asked for wisdom because he knew Solomon was going to need it. He was going to need wisdom in order to govern his people with justice. God wanted his people to be led, to be given, to be governed with mishpat. And in order to do that, the leadership, they needed wisdom. So quick side lesson, we all need wisdom. Solomon was raised by David, who was considered to be the best king in Israel's history. So his dad was like the best king. Solomon also lived in a country where God wrote his laws. God was their lawgiver. He gave them all of their rules. So even though Solomon, who was raised by the best king, who had laws written by God himself, he still felt like he needed wisdom in order to do justice. So good lesson for us, no matter how great you have been taught or mentored, no matter how great the structure or the laws of whatever work you're doing are, you're still going to need wisdom. So end of quick side lesson. Let's get back on track. So we're going to continue to read out of 1 Kings. I'm going to switch to the Good News Translation, and we're going to start in verse 16. And this is another semi-famous story. Two women go before Solomon, both claiming that a baby belongs to them. And quick history lesson, the king, he did not fix every little problem that his people had in the nation. The king was limited with his time. He really only saw the cases that were super complicated or super important. There was a lot of other leaders in a community that people could go to with their disputes, with their cases to get them settled. So we know if the king, who's very limited and very important, if he is personally hearing a case, it must be really, really hard. And no one else has been able to fix it yet. So before we even know the facts, we know this is a tough case. So let's read. One day, two prostitutes came and presented themselves before King Solomon. One of them said, "Your Majesty, this woman and I live in the same house, and I gave birth to a baby boy at home while she was there. 2 days later, after my child was born, she also gave birth to a baby boy. Only the two of us were in the house. No one else was present. Then one night, she accidentally rolled over her baby and smothered it. She got up during the night, took my son from my side while I was asleep, and carried him to her bed. Then she put the dead child in my bed. The next morning, when I woke up and was going to nurse my baby, I saw that it was dead. I looked more closely and saw that it was not my child. So let's pause. So the first woman, she lays out the details of this case. So it's just these two women living in this house. They both have newborn baby boys. The second woman, she woke up in the middle of the night and found out her baby had died. So the starting point for this case is trauma. This woman found out some of the most painful news a person can find out. She found out that her child had died. So the starting point, it's pain, it's suffering, it's trauma. And this woman, in that place of pain and suffering and trauma, she commits an injustice. She kidnaps another woman's child. She takes her baby who had died and switches him with this other woman's live baby. So we have a bit of background of why she did it, but what she did, it wasn't okay. In her trauma, she committed an injustice. She broke the relationship between a woman and her child. Then the first woman says what happened to her. She woke up, she found herself in bed with a baby who had died. That must also have been horrifically traumatic. Even though she realized it wasn't her child, that moment must have been horrifically traumatic for her. And I'm a mom, and newborn babies kind of all have this like smushy newborn face where they kind of look similar. But as a mom, you really know if a baby's yours or not. You spend hours staring at their face and like memorizing their super cute little dimples and the shape of their nose. So she would have known pretty quickly that the child didn't belong to her. Maybe somebody else, maybe a neighbor, maybe an aunt or an uncle, they may not have been able to tell the difference, but a mom can tell the difference. So she knew right away, this child is not mine. And we don't know what happened between that moment and them coming before King Solomon. But somehow she figured out the other woman had stolen her baby and was claiming it was hers. And they started to argue about it. They eventually end up before King Solomon. So we're going to continue to read. We hear a little bit about the very dramatic argument that they have in front of the king. And then we hear Solomon's response to that. He has to figure out who the real mother is without any of our like CSI modern investigative tools. There's no like DNA evidence. There's not even pictures. And we're also told there's no witnesses. So this is really tough. Solomon is going to have to figure out who the real mother is in some sort of creative other way. So let's read about what he does. But the other woman said, "No, the living child is mine and the dead one is yours." The first woman answered back, "No, the dead child is yours and the living one is mine." And so they argued before the king. Then King Solomon said, "Each of you claims that the living child is hers and that the dead child belongs to the other one." He sent for a sword, and when it was brought, he said, "Cut the living child in two and give each woman half of it." The real mother, her heart full of love for her son, said to the king, "Please, your majesty, don't kill the child. Give it to her." But the other woman said, "Don't give it to either of us. Go on and cut it in two." Then Solomon said, "Don't kill the child. Give it to the first woman. She was the real mother." So Solomon, how he solves this is he comes up with a test to test the heart of the mother. We don't know this, but we can kind of assume that he didn't actually intend on killing the child or cutting it in two. It really was just a test because he knew the real mother would never let her child die if she could prevent it. This mother, she would rather that her baby go to the woman who had kidnapped her, who had committed an injustice. She would rather that this baby live and be raised by the woman who had committed an injustice against her. She would rather that than for the baby to die. And Solomon knew that. He knew a mother would do anything, literally anything, for their child to live. So he came up with a test to test the true heart of the mother. And it may be hard to hear that the other woman's response was, "Well, go ahead and let the child die." You have to remember, though, she was in a place of pain and suffering herself. In the next verse, we're told Israel's response to this act of bringing justice. So let's read. I'm going to read 1 Kings 3:28 in the ESV. "And all of Israel heard of the judgment, Mishpat, that the king had rendered, and they stood in awe of the king, because they perceived that the wisdom of God was in him to do Mishpat, justice." So the nation, they could see this act was an act of justice. And what's the picture that we get of the justice that Solomon brought? The picture is of a restored relationship. He was able to determine who was the real mother and then restore the relationship back. The relationship had broken because of an injustice. The baby had been stolen. And him bringing Mishpat, bringing justice, It meant that he was able to repair that relationship. He was able to bring that relationship back again. So the picture, the effect of Mishpat, it is restored relationship. Something was broken and then it was healed. That mother and that child, they were reunited. That is a beautiful demonstration, a beautiful picture, a beautiful model, a beautiful example of biblical justice. A justice that's focused on shalom, a justice that's focused on restoration and healing. And the last point, notice what's missing in this picture. There is no punishment. We're not told that the woman whose baby had died, we're not told that she was put on trial and then put in jail. We're told nothing about if she was punished or even whether it was important that she was punished. This beautiful picture of Mishpat, it doesn't include punishment. Maybe she was punished, we're just not told about it. So the picture that's given, it's a picture of justice without punishment. That woman, she experienced pain, trauma, suffering. I don't think you need to add punishment to that. So that's a picture of biblical justice, of God's justice. It's a justice that wants to make the world right again. It's a justice that wants to bring healing, restoration, shalom. So that's it for today's episode. We are given in 1 Kings 3 this amazing, beautiful, practical example of doing Mishpat. It's a justice that's focused on making wrongs right, of bringing restoration and healing. It's a justice that's centered on shalom. So join me next time. We're going to continue this exploration of biblical justice and righteousness by looking at the Hebrew word for righteousness, tzedek. You can find me online at godlovesjustice.com and Facebook and Instagram at godlovesjustice.